Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about Kriya Yoga, Dhyana, and Paravastha. So there are some Kriya Yoga schools that advocate for a particular period of Dhyana. And Dhyana in Sanskrit means meditation. And so the idea is that the students will be sitting in Dhyana, in meditation, for a prescribed period of time. Some particular Kriya Yoga schools talk about this in terms of sitting in the stillness. And the idea is that by sitting in the stillness, you will get into a deep meditative state. So some schools prescribe that, for example, you would sit in stillness. Every time this week you'll sit in stillness for 10 minutes, and then the next week you will add on more time to that. So next week 15 minutes in stillness. And the following week you would be 20 minutes in stillness, and so on. And so the sitting in stillness is done after particular Kriya Yoga techniques like Kriya Pranayama and associated practices. So the term Dhyana is used in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and it is really the seventh stage or seventh step of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, it's really the idea, the progression one goes through in meditation to get into a ultimate meditative state. So the first two of those particular steps are yama and niyama, which has to do with the moral do's and don'ts. So the third stage is the asana, when you're sitting in your meditation posture. Once you're sitting in your meditation posture, the fourth stage is pranayama, which is life force control, a form of intentional breathing that starts to result in the fifth stage, which is pratyahara, which means internalization. And then from there, one is drawn into deeper aspects of meditation, like dharana, which is a concentration on an internalized void, into dhyana, the meditation proper, where you really become absorbed in your inner meditative experiences, and finally samadhi, the superconscious awareness. So folks are using Patanjali's Yoga Sutras to try and understand what's happening in meditation, but saying to students, hey, you need to sit in Dhyana, right? After you do the techniques, you need to sit into the stillness. And certainly, Kriya Yoga can result in something called Paravastha, right? So Paravastha is the after effect poise state of one's meditation. So one can begin to feel aspects of the freeze response of pratyahara, right? So you might feel tingling throughout your body and that kind of thing. As you are drawn into an internalized state, as you're brought into that low idle state, you start to feel those sensations. And eventually your body starts to recede from your awareness to get into true internalization, into pratyahara. But folks have asked me, students have asked me, when do I sit in Dhyana? How long do I sit in Dhyana? And I was like, well, what do you mean, when do you sit in Dhyana? They said, well, after I do my techniques, how long do I sit in Dhyana? So the point about Dhyana is it's not a time that you sit in stillness after doing Kriya Yoga techniques. That's not what Dhyana is. Dhyana is a state that results from your Kriya Yoga practice. So you need to go through certain stages, as I said. You're doing your pranayama, the life force control, right? The intentional breathing, which results in pratyahara. You start to feel these feelings of the freeze response, right? And start to be drawn within. And that becomes part of your paravastha, this after effect poise state. It starts to manifest while you're doing your Kriya pranayama. One needs to go through the certain stages to be able to get into Dhyana. Sitting in stillness after you do techniques does not equal Dhyana. That's not what Dhyana is. In Kriya Yoga, Dhyana is a result of the Kriya Yoga unfolding within you. So in the original Kriya Yoga, as taught in the Panchananbhadacharya lineage, which is a lineage in which I teach, pratyahara results from pranayama. And what Lahiri Baba said is that 12 Kriya results in pratyahara. He basically said 12 Kriya equals pratyahara. So the most important point is that your Kriya Yoga practice should result in these different states of awareness. So pranayama should result in pratyahara, right? The life force control or the intentional breathing results in internalization. And then the next thing that appears in Kriya is the tranquil breath. It's basically where your breath starts to shallow out and then disappears from your awareness. So it feels as if you're not breathing. Some have called this the breathless state. And from there, you're drawn into a very deep internalization. where the world basically disappears from around you, right? Your body disappears and you're in this deep internalized void, which is what's called Dhyana, right? That happens before you get into Dhyana, right? So you're not just sitting in stillness after techniques. You need to go through the stages of pratyahara, of the tranquil breath, of dharana, before you can get into Dhyana, before you can get into true meditation. And that really happens, that true meditation happens when you are deeply internalized and you become aware of the inner experiences unfolding within you and you become absorbed in them. So when students ask me, how much time do I sit after Kriya, Pranayama, and associated practices in Dhyana, I ask them, are you actually in Dhyana? And if you're not, that's okay. Like, that's, you know, if it can take a process and learning and development to actually get into true Dhyana. But when different Kriya Yoga schools say sitting in Dhyana equals just sitting in stillness after doing techniques, that's not correct at all. It's really about being absorbed in your inner meditative experiences. That is true Dhyana. And so it's okay after you've done Kriya Yoga practice, if you're doing Kriya Pranayama and associated practices, and you feel like you've done enough of those techniques and you just want to relax, right? And be, experiencing the Paravastha. So you might be experiencing, signs, subtle sensations of your meditation, right? You might experience a certain feeling of peace or stillness or bliss within you. And if you become absorbed in that and you have basically transitioned into the tranquil breath, you are really heading into dharana and Dhyana. But if you're not experiencing that, that's okay as well. You can just sit and relax and enjoy the Paravastha state, right? So the idea that some Kriya Yoga schools have, which is to sit in stillness after techniques for longer and longer periods, as if that will result in a deep absorption. That is not correct at all. It won't do that. I know, because I tried. And when I was learning with a different Kriya Yoga school, that is the way that we did things. It's like, okay, now you just learn to sit for longer and longer periods. What I was training myself to do was to sit for longer and longer periods, but that did not result in absorption, the Dhyana or the Samadhi. It did not result in that. It just trained me to sit still. And that's okay, but that's not the goal of meditation. The goal of meditation is to unfold those states of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, basically, right? We want to get into pratyahara, we want to experience the tranquil breath, we want to be drawn into dharana, into the internalized void, and we want to be drawn into Dhyana, absorption in our meditative experiences, and we want to become one with those, and that is Samadhi. So those of you who are, very sort of stoic in your practice and wanting to sit for longer and longer periods after doing your meditation techniques, I think that you may need to tweak some of the practices that you're doing, because you really want to see those states unfolding naturally as a result of your Kriya Yoga practice, rather than just sort of sitting there and waiting for them to arrive. So what that means is looking at the Kriya Yoga that you do. Are you getting the signs of pratyahara coming on in 12 Kriya? And if you're not, then you may need to tweak your Kriya Yoga technique. Now, obviously, I teach the Kriya Yoga in the Panchanambhadacharya lineage of Kriya Yoga. It's the original Kriyas taught by Lahiri Baba. And so that we know the techniques that were taught by Lahiri Baba in the way that he taught them result in those states naturally unfolding within you. So when you find those states unfolding naturally within you, you are practicing Sahaja Yoga, which is what Lahiri Baba called it. The original yoga, the natural yoga, the yoga that results in a true meditative and inner spiritual experience. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.